first question is, can you introduce yourself? What's your background and anything about your siblings?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Alexandra Little. I go by Alex. I graduated from the Master's in ABA program in 2019 and worked as a BCBA for about a year before then going back to USC to get my PhD in developmental psychology. So that's where I am now. And as far as my siblings, I have four brothers, and all of them except one fall on somewhat of a neurodivergent scale. One has pretty severe ADHD. The other has what would have been called Asperger's back in the day, but essentially just difficulty with social situations, things like that. And then the other one is more sensory difficulties and falls more on kind of the typical ASD spectrum, what you would imagine. And age-wise, they are 13 for the one with ADHD, and then the other two are twins, and they are 19.
So what's it like to grow up with a sibling on the spectrum?
Yeah, I don't know, growing up, you didn't really think anything of it. I was just kind of used to, oh, we have a routine. And if we say we're going to go out to dinner somewhere and then change our mind, that, can become difficult. And so we aren't going to do that. And as a family, you sort of adapt to just following what works for you and what works for the family. And I always knew there was something that was harder for them, and that, my mom would say, these things are easier for you, and it's easier for you to be able to handle a change or to talk to new people, but it's not as easy for your brothers. And so we have to help them and teach them and show them.
And you're the oldest, right?
Yeah, I'm the oldest by 7 years. So I was old enough to fully remember everything that's going on.
And the next question is, what was your family's experience like when the professionals weren't there?
It was okay. I think my mom did a lot of reading, and she was definitely one of those parents who, when we were told or given advice about what we can do and how we can, adapt and maybe change our environment, she listened and was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And really took the approach of, if this is what my child needs, this is what I'm going to do. And yeah, like I said, I think we adapted our lifestyle also. So it wasn't just them who were going through changes, but we all rallied behind them and were like, we need to work together to make this function. And to me, it didn't really feel like it was any different. I guess I didn't have any other experience to go off of, but yeah.
Right. And did you guys have any therapies like ABA or other therapies?
We had speech therapy very consistently, and then mostly just psychotherapy was actually the predominant one. My mom read a lot of books on behaviorism and made some changes in the house, but at the time ABA wasn't as easily accessible, I would say. So it was very expensive and essentially could only be done privately, and so for that reason, I think is probably why we didn't go that route. But once I got into ABA, I realized how many of the different techniques my parents, incorporated into the house just based on what they had learned on their own. And part of the reason why I was so drawn to it is it just felt very familiar.
You see, that makes sense. Okay, so your family didn't do ABA, but you guys did speech therapy. Was it kind of like ABA where it's in-home sessions? Where did you guys go?
Yeah. So the therapist would come. I remember being very involved in them. My parents both worked, and at the time we had a babysitter. And so, and our babysitter was not from here. She was from Czechoslovakia. And the speech therapist wanted me to be the one to do the speech therapy with my brothers because she didn't want a thicker accent, I would say, while they were still trying to learn pronunciation and things like that. And so I ended up being one of their main people for speech therapy when I was about 9.
Oh, wow. What was that experience like? Did you want to do it? Or were you happy to be there?
Yeah, I was excited. I mean, I think I was always the type of kid who was excited to have siblings and liked kids and wanted to be around them. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. This is fun. Let's say giraffe,
Right. What was something that was meaningful or inspiring to you that having like the speech therapy sessions did for you or for your brothers?
Yeah, I think watching them be able to grow in that independence and be able to communicate so much easier with everybody. And it was no longer just, certain things that we understood because they said it and we're their family, but now they were able to communicate their needs and wants to everybody around them. And even some of the behavior techniques that my mom put in place, I would say that she took like a very compassionate approach to it. And there was never really severe punishment, and there was never things taken away. It was always an opportunity, and she very much made sure that they knew. Sorry, there's stuff going on beside distracting. But yeah, I would just say that like overall our experience was very human. There wasn't a point when it was like they did something wrong and we were like, nope, try again. That was never the experience. It was always like, oh my gosh, that was hard. I know it's hard. We have to keep trying, and they were never allowed to escape, but they were also never told that their feelings were invalid. And I think that was a really key part to them now where they're at in they're both in college and they both have friends. And, you wouldn't know if you met them and they didn't share that part of their journey, you wouldn't know that that was what they went through as kids.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Do you have any um advice for what parents should be looking out for when they're like looking for ABA services?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the main thing that I would look for if I was a parent was someone who's going to respect what I'm saying. So I think a lot of times therapists, especially if they aren't taking as much of a compassionate approach, have a tendency to be like, no, I'm right. We have to do it this way. And at the end of the day, that's just not going to work for you and your family if that's not something you want. If you want a more intense approach, absolutely go for it. But if that's not something that you would do in your own home on your own without the therapist there, then it's not going to work out. And so be looking for a therapist who's going to come in and who's going to be able to show you techniques that work for you, techniques that you know and are comfortable with doing when they're gone. And if that doesn't include a more, stricter approach to the behavior change, then talk with them about how you can take a more compassionate approach, because that's ultimately what you're going to be able to continue. And that's the key to success. I would say as a sibling too, the reason my siblings succeeded was because my parents were part of it. My parents at no point were like, oh, well, the therapist here, hands off. They were very much, what did the therapist do? What do we need to do at home? What is our homework? How do we continue this? And that is the reason that I believe that they were so successful. So that's my advice.
Yeah. What about from um a sibling's perspective? Like, how do you think ABA programs can learn from siblings on like what works for them for like their clients during therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have a typically developing sibling in your house, look to them for how they function in their house. They're the perfect example of how you would want your client to be behaving. And so if in that household, it's okay for the sibling to go into the fridge and get a snack wherever they want, then that's something that should be okay for your client as well. The sibling, and from my perspective, it's that there shouldn't be different rules, that because I'm typically developing and my siblings maybe weren't, that we had to follow different rules in the household. We have the same rules, we have the same things that we need to do. And at the end of the day, as a therapist, I want to look towards that sibling. And from my perspective, I would want someone to look at me and be like, oh, this is how you act. Okay, great. So this is how your family functions. Let's work within that.